What I'm going to do now is actually to pick up from what Patrick said. I'm going to try and make big data small. Because only when you can make big data clean and make big data small to answer very specific sort of business type questions, then can you actually use it in your hotel or company to really drive incremental revenue and incremental profits. So this was a little bit of a pet project of mine. So I've been in the world of revenue management for a long time. And of course, in the last couple of years, moved into kind of analytics and the use of big data. So for the company, for Fairmont, Raffles, and Swissôtel, we took a look at all the different revenue that we manage, and we thought, wow, we do a great job on the room side, but about a quarter of our revenue is in all of our restaurants. This does not even include banquet and catering. Just 25% of our revenue that we manage is in our restaurants. And we thought, hang on a minute, there are not really many people in the travel industry who do a great job in terms of managing the restaurant revenue. So we kind of put a little bit of a think tank together. We brought our food and beverage people together. We brought our revenue managers together and say, you know, we have all of the data. Some of it may be dirty, so let's think a little bit about how to make it clean, how to, you know, we are great at Excel spreadsheets, so we put a couple of little tools there, put some colors and stuff. But the whole idea around it was to really transform our food and beverage operations from just delivering service, delivering great service, to being truly profitable, and kind of start to use that as a pillar to build this total hotel profit optimization culture. Now, if I have any idea where the clicker is. So we try to make the whole, program a little bit more simpler, sorry. We try to make the whole program a little bit simpler in terms of how to approach it. So bear in mind, we've used this program with thousands of our food and beverage. We wanted to engage thousands of our food and beverage colleagues around the world, including our directors of revenue management. We wanted to include and engage the marketeers as well, because a lot of the hotel marketeers have a big role to play in understanding the business of restaurant. So we look at some strategic levers to explain what are the things that you could look at to drive incremental revenue. We broke it down into just simple strategies. So what are some strategies you could always use at any time? It's always a great idea to look at for your restaurants. But if you have some peak periods, if you see peak demand periods, what are some hot strategies that you could use? And if you then have off-peak demand periods, what are some cold strategies that you use? So this is kind of the overall framework to make it very accessible for the company as a whole. So just a big picture first. This is kind of where our restaurant program sits within this big picture of building this total hotel profit optimization culture. So we do a lot in rooms. We're working with ideas actually on the function space side. So that's going to go out in quite a big way next year. And then, of course, the restaurant, we've been working on it for the last 3 years. So more or less about 80% of our restaurant revenues are now covered by this program. And we've done a little bit in spa as well. In spa, it's not yet so, the prices don't change as often as they should, but it's just a general business acumen about spa. And of course, to make all of this successful, we've actually put something right in the middle. And I would say that this piece is actually probably more important than any of the strategy or platform or anything like that. We've built kind of this RevPro culture, and the whole idea was to take revenue management beyond the director of revenue management into really a collective group, and to make it not about reporting history, but about very forward thinking. So there's quite a bit that goes behind what is this RevPro culture and how we've gone to build it up, but that's a story for a kind of a different day. So back to restaurant. We have a couple of objectives when we set out. We wanted to help our restaurateurs really understand the business using some data analytics and making it in a very digestible, simple format. We looked at it and said, you know, one of the things about hotel restaurants is that there are not enough peak demand periods. So originally when we said, let's apply traditional revenue management tactics, let's just look at increasing prices, let's look at discounts and stuff, we realized that there were not enough peak periods to actually just apply only revenue management tactics. We said, on the other hand, every guest that walks in, unlike hotel rooms, a hotel room, you already know what the average rate is. They come in, they're going to pay you, they've booked $350 or whatever it is. But for a restaurant person, they can come in, they can sit and tie up your most expensive place on a Friday night for like 3 hours, and you have no idea whether the average check is going to be $10 or it's going to be $120. And who is going to be the one to kind of make sure that that average check goes out at $120 instead of $10? The server is the one that actually has a lot of ability. So we build a lot of strategies that focus around optimizing server performance. And then, of course, there is still the traditional demand and revenue management. So we made sure that restaurants understood their demand by hour, by day of week, not typically something that's so obvious for a lot of our restaurant guys. Then with that, we looked at then different strategies that could then help maximize on the revenue or on the pricing side. And then just overall operational efficiency, things like forecast that helps you do your food preparation better, helps you minimize your food cost wastage. So we use that whole area in order to try and engage the executive chefs as well. Because bear in mind, right at the back of all of this is we want the hotel as a whole to have this overall culture right across the board, whether it's the DRM all the way to the executive chef. And so that's the final one, the restaurant revenue culture. So after the first 18 months, we took a look at hotels that implemented this program and hotels that didn't. So you can see that the results were really different between the two groups of hotels. Hotels that had the program going, I think mainly because of the very proactive culture and just thinking about how to generate more revenue, they outgrew their other hotels by leaps and bounds. So we built a lot of this around kind of 3 strategic levers: how to manage time, how to manage space, and how to manage price. I won't spend too much on that. I'll just jump straight into, here are some strategies that, you know, is always a good thing to do for your restaurants, whether you're busy or non-busy. And I think a couple of you have already heard me tell the story of Clarissa, but I enjoy telling the story of Clarissa because this is really sort of representing what we looked at in terms of server performance. So Clarissa is actually, this is not the young lady, but the young lady looks pretty much like that. Beautiful young lady is our server at Equinox, which is the the restaurant right at the top of Swiss Hotel, the Stanford in Singapore. So it's a fine dining restaurant. And we were looking at average check of the servers. This is comparing the average check of all the servers in that restaurant. So every time someone comes in, and if Clarissa is serving you, the person would leave with an average check that's about $15 less than anybody else. So Clarissa had the lowest average check, although she was very pleasant, she was seen as a good server, people enjoyed her and they liked her and all that. So here was the question was, every time you put someone in front of Clarissa, the restaurant would be not making as much money as if you put the guest in front of another server. So how do we help Clarissa understand what it takes to actually increase her average check? So this is a program called Single Server Mentoring. So when we looked into details of what Clarissa was selling versus every other server in that restaurant, we realized that she was not selling foie gras. So foie gras as a starter was the most popular. So on average, the best performing server could sell about 6 foie gras for every 10 guests. But Clarissa was only selling 2 foie gras for every 10 guests. That's a high revenue dish, high profit dish. Customers are very happy with it because it's a signature item for the restaurant. So when Clarissa realized this, we said, hey Clarissa, you don't seem to be selling too many foie gras. It's quite a popular dish with all the other servers. Why do you think that's the case? She said, oh, I hate liver. So she's a vegetarian, she absolutely does not like liver, and so she's projected her own likes and dislikes onto the rest of the guests, and without realizing it, made the restaurant lose revenue. So we use a lot of analytics now to have one of these strategies and one of these programs. So we run this program actually right across the board through all of our servers. So the idea is to take the bottom performing servers, help them identify how to increase their average check. And we've been generating, just on this 1 out of 11 strategies, we've been generating about $3 million incremental revenue per year on this. So what's a little bit behind the analytics of single server mentoring? So imagine this is the average check of 10 different servers in a restaurant. So server number 9, on average sells, say, $14. And this $14 comprises of $7 of appetizer, $4 of entree, $1 of dessert, and $1 of beverage. What it doesn't tell you is that, in fact, this server was seen by the restaurant as really, really performing well, because the restaurant was having a promotion on appetizers. And in fact, this server was winning the promotion on appetizers. So as far as the restaurant was concerned, this is an outstanding server. But what happened was, by selling so much appetizers, the person no longer sold any entree. So was underselling entree. It's actually the restaurant was losing money by this person being so successful in the promotion. This server, on the other hand, server number 6, was doing a great job with entree. Therefore, the average check was much higher. However, you see, could probably do a little bit better with trying to encourage people to, pick a couple of appetizers or so. And of course, you have server 2 now. You know that this is kind of the ideal mix, because not only is the person able to sell most of the items, but look at the beverage check. So we're able to bring it right down to the fact that for this $4.20 of beverage check, it is because instead of always just selling house wine, this person is able to always recommend a sort of better quality of wine or a different type of drink. So because we can bring it down to a very personal conversation with the server, it's become a really, I think, a sort of foundational kind of a coaching program for us. So revenue's gone up, satisfaction of the team members have gone up, because managers now know how to have meaningful conversations with them. Second strategy, which is always a good thing to do, is of course menu engineering. So we've just built a very simple tool which our executive chefs now use. Again, it's just in Excel. It's just all populated with colors and stuff that tells you the usual things. So you have your star. So we said, okay, if you see a star, usual thing, what would you do? You increase the price of your star item, and you would recommend it. Make sure that it's featured nicely in the restaurant, it's on the menu, it's highlighted, and so on. And of course, if you have a cash cow is something that sells a lot of, but the contribution margin isn't quite as high. What would you do with a cash cow? If you see a menu item and it comes out on the grid and it says it's a cash cow, what would you do with that item? It's very popular, so what would you do with the price? You would absolutely put it up. So one of my favorite stories is of this chicken pie at one of the restaurants. It was the #1 selling item during lunch. It sold hundreds of it on average. But one of the reasons was because it was the cheapest item on the menu. So without having to change the entire menu price, which gives people the impression that your restaurant has become expensive, all you needed to do was to shift this one item price. So from $14 something, it went up to $15, and then they shifted it further to $16. So you keep shifting it until you see the volume drop off, right? Then you know you've hit sort of the max. So 14 to 16, that's just $2, which is more than a 10% that goes straight to your profit line. So all these little sort of activities like that can generate a lot of really high profits without changing customer perception at all. So you can increase the price. The other tactic that we encourage our restaurants to do is actually to bundle it. So to bundle it so that you use this popular item in order to try and help you sell even more. So bundle it with a drink, bundle it with a starter or a soup. Because you know this item is popular, you can use it to actually leverage on others. So likewise for the puzzle, what do you do with a puzzle? Well, you can either try, a puzzle means it's actually very profitable, it's just not very popular. So what you could do with it is you could highlight it, recommend it, have your servers talk a little bit more about it, or you could bundle it, because if it's very profitable, maybe you throw in a drink to make it a little bit more attractive, throw in a sort of a salad or something by the side to make it look more attractive. So our restaurants essentially are just encouraged to try different ones of these strategy. So let's see how, oops. Then the third one is, of course, menu design. So menu design, there are a couple of things. If you take a look at it, descriptive labels, these are all studies that have been done already by Cornell University, so you know that it's sort of the correct thing. So between a regular menu name, like zucchini cookies, right at the bottom, If you give it a descriptive name like Grandma's Zucchini Home-Baked Cookies, or Succulent Italian Seafood Fillet, or satin chocolate pudding and stuff. So in the description, they've shown that by showing 2 different menus randomly given, that the menu with the descriptive can fetch 27% more increase in sales. So definitely spend the time to be a marketeer to look at how you're describing your food items. Typography and alignment. So more and more of our restaurants, we've encouraged them to do this. So if you have $20 in number with a sign, if you have the word $20 spelled out, or if you just had a simple 20, you can see that the average check, if nothing else changes, is just the typography. The simple 20 is the one that does it best. So you see our Bow Valley Grill restaurant below, they've actually moved it such that it's not just a simple number, but also that it's not aligned, because when a number is aligned right down the row, what do? You can't help it. You will look first at the price before you look at the menu item. And you will tend to choose by price as opposed to choose by description. So it's worked out really well for our restaurants who have tried this simple step. Then the other part of menu design, which we now use a lot of, is really just highlighting signature items. It's a very simple thing. So lunch at John. John is, again, another one fine dining restaurant. They have, what they did was it's a set menu with a set price. But now any set menus with set prices, we always encourage people, have something that they can buy up to. So even if you have a buffet, we will have a drinks menu that is a la carte that you can buy up to. And you will have a glass for $5, but free flow for $7. So you always try and think about how else you could get incremental revenue even when you have buffets. So we kind of try to put together a little bit of these best practices on how you can tackle and get even more incremental revenue from buffets, which typically people think it's a flat price and that's it. So Jean has done really well by having these types of supplements. They introduce supplements for high demand items, so they price it according to the demand for the supplements. So their revenue went up and their profit went up from this. So combining this strategy of design as well as with the menu engineering. So this is the Tonga Room in San Francisco. It's a very, very popular bar in the heart of San Francisco. So they took a look at all of their cocktails. So all of their cocktails had the same price, but they realized that from menu engineering that Mau Tai was actually the most popular cocktail there. And they also then tested to say, okay, if I'm trying to push Mau Tai, would it be the beginning of the menu, the middle of the menu, or the end of the menu? And which part of that page are they going to? So they actually did all sorts of tests over a 2-week period with that to find the most optimal place. So they did menu design testing and so on. And at the end of the day, they increased this particular cocktail by $1. So this one was just more expensive than the rest of the cocktails because it was the most popular. And actually, I think they've increased it even further because it continued to be like a really favorite item. So from there, their beverage revenue mix went from 48 to 56%, and their beverage profit went up further as well. Then decoy pricing. Decoy pricing, so far we haven't been very good at using decoy pricing for our rooms. I think that would be very interesting to try. But decoy pricing is very easy to adopt in restaurants. So decoy pricing is essentially, I think the example is the one to be used is really the Economist. So have a look at this, where Economist has 2 versions, either the .com subscription for $59, or if you want the print version, it's $125. So given this choice with the 2 prices, we saw that most people bought just the .com version. It was just cheaper. So on average, Economist got $80 per person out of the subscription. But then they introduced something which, if you think about it, $125 for both print and web subscription. So the idea was, when that happened, straight away people thought, wow, $125, that's a really, really good price. Because now they have changed their frame of reference. They're not comparing 59 and 125. They're comparing 125 and 125. They said, for 125, I get the web subscription for free. If I had only paid $125 for the print subscription, that became the anchor price. So this $125 for print subscription is really the decoy price. You don't expect anybody to buy it. You just use it to anchor a very high price so that your next item just looks like a good deal. So that's really at the base of decoy pricing, and we now try and use it in a lot of our restaurants. So if you see a really expensive item there, then you probably know that that's for decoy pricing. We don't really expect you to kind of go for it. But like for menu engineering, one of the biggest wins we had was, does everybody know the Singapore Sling drink at the Long Bar in Singapore? Anybody wants to make a guess how many glasses of Singapore Sling that Long Bar sells per year? Per year. Just a guess. 40,000. Anybody else? 1 million? Okay, that's probably a bit much, but okay. You like it? Okay. Yeah, that's right. When are you next coming? When are you next coming? So just that one single bar sells, just on that one drink, not any other drink, 500,000 Singapore slings. So that one item, when we saw it, we said, look, could you squeeze 10 cents out of it? Could you increase it by another $1? So we have already maxed it out completely. So it's the most expensive, right? So if you did it anymore, people are going to be unhappy. You're going to get negative reviews on social media and stuff. So you know you've maxed it out. But how do you think you could continue to get, say, $5 more from that drink? What would you need to do? What would you need to do to do it?
Peanuts are free.
The peanuts are free. So it's not exactly decoy pricing, but the idea was to have to keep that version, but to have a much bigger version with the Merlion, and to have the Merlion and that version for free, or the Merlion, or part of the Raffles, the Raffles Hotel. So. Yeah, so and you can actually take it, and you can take it away in a gift package and stuff. So sometimes when you have a really popular item, we actually challenge all of our hotels and their restaurants to say, if you needed another $5 on this, can this very famous or very well-known dish, what do you need to do to be able to get more money? So the presentation is different, the way they bundle it with different things is different. But so we've realized that a lot of restaurants now become very creative in the way they price things and the way they bundle things. Customer, very soon, very soon. So customer value pricing. So have a look. These two cheese dishes are actually more or less the same basic type of cheese, but just by packaging it, presenting it in such a way, you would say that, well, someone would probably be willing to pay $5, $6 difference for it. The nachos as well. This nachos dish is something that's at Brewworks. Because they were doing menu engineering, they've been increasing the price of this nacho dish at Brewworks in Singapore. I think it's up to the $21. $21 for nachos is really expensive. And so they know they've maxed it out. So the question was, if they wanted to charge $26 for it, what would they need to do? You throw a couple of scallions on it, you change the color of the chips a little bit, you sprinkle some tomato and stuff on it, and we'll say, whoa, that looks like a remarkable dish. Sure, $26 compared to $21. So this concept of customer value pricing is something that we're trying to get a lot of our restaurants to think about as well. Not just normal demand-based pricing, so we move from cost-based to demand-based, but now we're trying to talk about being creative so that you can actually charge based on what customers are willing to pay for a dish. So as we know, this one, I think most of us are very familiar with this. $1 up in price can come up with a net profit of 12%. So that's what we've seen. The percentage of profit growth has always been much higher. Hot strategies. So hot strategies, the first thing we do is we ask, what is a hot period? Because we realized that for a lot of restaurants, they said, a hot period is when we're so busy, we can't handle it. But we say, no. For revenue management, it's not about being operationally busy. It's about when your tables are really full, or when your customers are waiting, when you're turning them away, So we specifically have a sort of a criteria for what is a busy period. So of course, optimal table mix is one of the strategies that you would use. So in one of our restaurants here, this restaurant always had very long queues for one of its buffets, the Swiss Hotel Merchant Court. It had very long queues. And of course, we realized that the table mix was wrong. They had a lot of tables of 4, and a lot of people were coming as couples. And so what they did was they managed the reservations, and they also changed some of the table size. They brought smaller tables, made sure that there were a lot more tables of 2. So the overall seat occupancy would have gone up. So for this particular restaurant, they were able to increase their revenue per seat hour by 12% by making some of these simple shifts. Now the demand by hour and by day of week. So we try and help the restaurants see their demand in terms of an easy to look at chart. So this particular one was in a restaurant in the Canadian Rockies. And when the director of food and beverage looked at it, he said, wow, on Sunday, I have a Sunday brunch. I've already maxed out on my seats. I have an 80% and I have a 92%. That means they can't even turn the table around anymore. They've already got 2 turns. So the moment he looked at it, he said, well, I had no idea. So I said, what do you do now that you see your demand like this? He said, I'm going to go back and increase my price. And that's exactly what he did. He went back the very next week. He increased, he's already maximized 2 table turns. So he increased his Sunday brunch pricing by 6%, and his profits went up by 10%. And actually, he's been still adjusting it a little bit more over time. So another example of demand-based pricing is Brewworks. So Brewworks is one of the few bars where you can see across the different times of day, they actually have different prices. And so on 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when you go to the river in Singapore and you go to a Brewworks, there's just so many people drinking beer, you can't believe it. You go to any other bar, nobody's drinking beer at 3 o'clock. So other demand-based pricing that we sort of copied and applied. So this is City Space Bar. It's got an amazing view. So we put a supplement across all the tables that have the view. But of course, if you are a hotel guest or you spend above a certain amount, we waive it. But just that one tactic alone for this particular restaurant generated $120,000 incremental revenue in 1 year. So other hot strategies that we look at is to reduce meal duration. So we had a very, very peak period so every Thursday night, the Prego restaurant in Singapore was very packed. And they were trying to actually increase the number of table turns. They also realized something very unusual. The duration that someone sat at a table varied the most on that Thursday night. Because they were actually very, very busy, they realized that every table where a person ordered the pot roast would be the table where it would take 20 minutes more to clear the table. Because whenever one person on that table ordered a pot roast, and the pot roast took much longer to come out, the whole table would have to sit for 20 minutes more. And because there were all these pockets of tables that sat for 20 minutes more, it meant that other guests couldn't come in. So the simple thing to do was, we removed the pot roast as an option for Thursday and Friday when it was peak. And the revenue went up significantly just because they were able to turn the table around. So it's kind of using all these different tactics to help people think about what you should do on that. So some core strategies. I mean, unfortunately, in many cities, the restaurants actually have far more cold periods than they do hot periods. So this one is just understanding, to help to understand what is really their hourly demand. So this is this was the jazz bar at the Peace Hotel on the Bund. So they saw that, okay, they have a 6 to 8 p.m. They really have, on average, just very, very low demand. So they targeted a new group segment, not a big brand new strategy. They went out and they got some of the tour groups to come in and so on for this time period. And then they were very surprised to see that demand dropped off after 10 p.m. Why would a jazz bar, one of the most famous jazz bars where people actually come, why would this demand drop off? Not something that they ever realized until they saw their data. And then when they dug in a little bit deeper, they realized it's because the jazz bar is actually well known for the band of old guys sort of playing music. Now the average age, I have gone and I've asked, The drummer looks actually pretty young, but he's 87 years old. And so most of them are like in their 78, I think was one of the youngest, to 80, 87 and so. And naturally at 10 o'clock, they can't play anymore. They are pretty tired. And so they went off. And so the hotel at that time had gone and brought in this modern jazz band, which actually was probably paid 3 times the amount that this traditional Chinese jazz band was being paid. And because the jazz bar is not known for modern jazz, that's not what you go there for. You go to listen to this group of elderly gentlemen play old sort of Shanghainese, Chinese jazz and stuff. So now what they did was they brought in a second group. So they kind of fired that contemporary jazz group. They brought in a second group of Chinese gentlemen who were about the age of 65 to 75. And this is the second group that came in. They put 2 beautiful Shanghainese ladies in the cheongsam and stuff there. And right after all this happened, the jazz bar received a record-breaking revenue, 14% above budget. So the story here is just that the data is visualized for them. Once people start thinking about the actual demand, the actual business that's coming in and out, the restaurateurs are very creative. I mean, they know what to do to handle it. So other typical things we do to be able to provide a discount price, but using it as a price fence, which is very traditional revenue management, so I won't go too much into it. Just as an example, we have a section of the Japanese restaurant in Singapore again, which was not getting enough occupancy for the seats. So instead of just creating discounts in order to fill overall occupancy, we really segmented it. So a particular menu was put in, but you can only take this low cost menu at lunch period only at the batayaki counter. So because we had this price, this fence price that's there, it attracted a new market segment. So overall, the counter seat occupancy went from 5% to 50%. Counter sales went up by 126%, and overall performance of the restaurant with this went up by 14% year on year. And of course, reservation channels. So we also took a look at managing reservation channels. It was very simple. We saw a lot of lost calls, abandoned calls. So we simply shifted the reservation hour. We saw not enough calls coming in early, but a lot of calls coming in 7 to 8 o'clock. So we just took the whole reservation team, shifted some of them into handling 1 more hour later, and immediately we got 1,000 incremental covers just by having someone pick up the phone. Right. And of course, this won't be a digital marketing conference otherwise, but to get the word out there, you do have to leverage all of your digital channels. Because our restaurants, we will have no money for print ads or anything of that sort. So it's really the digital and it's PR that has to get out there. So we work with the digital marketing team to kind of put together a couple of best practices and tip documents to help our restaurant managers become digital marketeers, to just understand a little bit more. One of the examples we said was, we asked the restaurant, we said, you're not really full. You're kopitiam, you're not really full. What ideas do you have to generate business? So they said, oh, we're going to come up with a set menu for couples, set menu for 2 persons. I said, why do you think that's your target audience? They said, well, we just haven't tried it before. I said, have you looked at your, what people are talking about in terms of social reviews for your website? So not surprisingly, it was really the very first time most of our restaurant managers have never really looked at what people are saying about their restaurants. So it was very interesting. This restaurant, their #1 dish was the fish head curry. So if you were to do any type of promotion to drive business, what would you do? You would have this huge fish head promotion. You would bundle and pack everything around the fish head because that is clearly its one competitive signature dish, which is what they did. So that particular promotion was one of the most kind of successful that they've had. So we try and get them to make sure they understand what people are actually like about the restaurant on social media. And so this is just a summary of kind of all the various strategies that we use, and I think that is it. So with that, thank you very much.